thank you so much for coming out tonight, or this afternoon. It's a practice time today. My name is Chris. I'm Public Policy Manager at Center for Health Progress. Like many of you out there, we believe that healthcare systems should work for everyone. We believe that factors such as race, income, and zip code should not determine your ability to live a healthy life or your health outcome. So we bring people together to come up with common sense solutions to those complex issues. And when Coloradans are healthier, we can create healthier communities and a stronger Colorado. So when we talk about a stronger Colorado and prosperous communities, we're talking about a movement building. And we have a perfect speaker today to talk about movement building. He's a leader in act and thought. And we will give him a proper introduction in a moment from one of our board members. So in the meantime, I have a bit of a few announcements to make. I know you guys are looking at your food and thinking, this salmon looks not like salmon. So we apologize. We still have vegetarian options. They're portobello, and I hear it's fantastic as well. So the choices are chicken and portobello mushrooms. We do apologize. But the work that we do is dependent on the hard work and dedication of our staff, the compassion of leaders, both elected and not. And also donations. So we know that there are many ways for you to raise your voice, make sure it's heard, that you're part of this great movement of health equity. But one of the ways that you can raise your voice and be part of this movement is by making a contribution. Big or small, there's staff all around, which we can raise our hands out there. And there are envelopes at your table as well. You can also, so you can flag any of our staff and they'll help you out. If you need to go home and get a bigger check, then you can also go on our website, centerforhealthprogress.org, and make donations there and become a member of our great organization. I now want to thank our major donors at this point. We are grateful for their partnership and their support. So I want to shout out our premier supporter, Centura. We can give them a hand of applause. They're providing excellent care, and they're actually doing the work necessary to make our healthcare system in Colorado more equitable and more inclusive of the great people who live here. Our other major sponsors are Colorado Access, Brio, CU Medicine, Delta Dental Foundation, SCL Health, UC Health. So we can give them another round of applause. I'm also realizing that I'm blind to the back, so let me put on my glasses for a second here. So when we have, we'll have our board member introduce DeRay Mckesson, and after that there will be a Q&A for you guys, so make sure that you have some great questions. It's going to be really interactive. After that, we'll be giving out awards. That will be our Health Equity Champion Award, and it will honor transformative leaders in the healthcare space in Colorado. And without further ado, I want to bring one of my favorite people that I've met since I've moved here, Kelly Perez.
I'm Ellie Caulkins. I'm the CEO and founder of Kind Colorado. We are a social venture that works with cannabis businesses to do cannabis social responsibility in the community. Health and improving the health of the community is everyone's responsibility, and so it is my pleasure to work with cannabis businesses to bring them to that space as well. I'm very excited. I joined the Center for Health Progress's board almost mostly because of Joe. Because the courage and the imagination and the get it done-ness that I knew would be present with him was pretty phenomenal. I had since the pleasure to meet the rest of the phenomenal board members and the staff members, and this is just really an amazing team. And unlike some other boards that I've been a part of, we work together and we get to learn from each other, and it is just a real pleasure to do that. It wouldn't be possible to do it separate from the staff or separate from the community. So, movement building, pretty hard work. It takes all of us in this room and pretty much everyone we know or ever have known. It requires shifting power, centering people who are most affected by the issues. It means talking openly about race and class and disrupting. It means understanding our community's history and our country's history even while we make it. The movement for health equity is still really new and moving in Colorado, and thank you all for being a part of it. Your race, your gender, your identity, your identification, your immigrant status, none of that should have anything to do with whether you have the opportunity to see a doctor, access nutritious food, have safe places to play, and be able to move throughout your community. It should not determine whether you can survive an interaction with the police or whether your grandchildren will be happy and thriving. We must hold ourselves and each other accountable. This is a choice and an opportunity. An action, also a choice and an opportunity. But it will continue to lead to the loss of lives and trauma to our communities. We have a role in building this movement. I'm a little bit of a fangirl right now because DeRay Mckesson is one of those movement makers who saw what was happening in Ferguson and dropped everything as an administrator with Minnesota Public Schools and said, I have to be there. He thought he'd be there for the weekend. I believe he was there for 400 days. The best is about the 400 days of winter, rain, rubber bullets, tear gas. He's helped to really raise the national conscious and conversation over the past 5 years, and it's really ballooned and shifted quite a bit. I found out that his book came out September 7th, so of course I stayed up way too late last night reading it. And what is so phenomenal about it is that I don't know about you all, but I imagine you have trouble keeping your chins up from time to time. You've got quite a lot of challenges ahead of us. And this book is filled with so much faith and hope and love for what we could be, that equitable, the world of equity and joy, and that's a quote from this book, that we don't know yet. But he can imagine the world that way, and it really helped me remember that I too can imagine the world that way. That's why we're all here. So, without further ado, please welcome DeRay Mckesson.
Back in Colorado, you know, I always tell people one of my best friends in college teaches here in Colorado. She moved right after we graduated from college, and because of it, I say yes to everything in Colorado. I love her so much. People are like, "Will you come talk?" I'm like, "Of course, it'll be great." So it's good to be here. I'm excited to talk about health beyond hospitals and how we think about equity that's not just confined to hospital rooms. It's an honor to be here on behalf of the Center for Health Progress as we start to think about what equity looks like. You know, I spend most of my time dealing with issues of policing, mass incarceration, and the racial wealth gap, so it's always exciting to talk about some of the other things that I care about. I'll start though with a story about being a teacher. So I taught 6th grade math in East New York, Brooklyn. It was incredible. 6th graders are great. 7th grade is puberty and deodorant, and it's bad, but 6th grade is still a whole lot of joy. You know, like 6th graders, you can walk in and be like, you're a mathematician, and they're like, yes! 7th graders are like, what are you doing? And you're like, okay. But 6th grade was great, and I taught 60, 90, and 120-minute classes, which is a lot of math for 11-year-olds. And one day, my students were like, can we go to gym early? And I was like, absolutely. You can go to gym early, I'm tired of you, you're tired of me, good to go. So they go to gym, and then they come back really quickly. And I'm like, why are you back so quick? And when I realized that they're more in love with the idea of gym than the work of gym. And I say that because in this moment, I think there are people more in love with the idea of resistance than the work of resistance. So I want to talk about what I think the work looks like. And it's been a long 4 years. You know, we were in the street for 400 days in St. Louis, and who ever saw us marching, it wasn't that we thought marching was cool, because we would have stayed still in August, September, and October of 2014, and we sit still for more than 5 seconds and we were arrested, which is why we marched all the time. The police thought that it was going to be the thing that tired us out, and we were like, no, we gotta march, you gotta march. And we just like marched all night. But I say that because we've come a long way in some ways we have a lot more to go. The first thing I think about is one of the chants that we did so often in the street, a chant that you were probably familiar with, which was no justice, no peace. And we said it all the time. And the reason that we said no justice, no peace so much, and people experienced it as a threat, but we understood it as a statement of fact and something that was just true. That any call for peace that wasn't rooted in justice was just a call for order and compliance. And we knew that any freedom that our lives actually deserve would never be rooted in something as basic as order and compliance. So when we said no justice, no peace, it was a call to action for us. It was a reminder that the only reason that we were in the street was because other people were violent. We didn't bring the violence. We came out with the truth and self-violence. But we said no justice, no peace is a cry and a call to action. And when we think about what that looks like we want a justice that we can feel and touch and see and heal. We want a justice made real. We don't want an abstract justice. We want a justice that says my ground is coming home today, that Tamir is outside playing with his friends, and that Freddie Gray is going to work. This idea of like a justice made real is what caused us to be in the street. When we say no justice, no peace, that is it. This idea that poverty is not justice, that police violence is not justice. And when people ask us, like, why are we disrupting the street? We're like, we're at the very least trying to help people see that our lives have already been disrupted. The least that we can do is have you stuck in traffic for another 5 minutes. And that is like the most basic thing happening. But it was this idea of the only way to disrupt the status quo is to force people to deal with things that they otherwise wouldn't. So when people ask me what is protest, I always think about protest as telling the truth in public. This idea that we use our bodies to tell the truth, that Mike and Rakia and Ayana should be alive today. And that other people have used the spaces they're in to tell the truth about the world that we live in. And that has to be a part of the work. So when I think about like why I'm called to action in this moment, it is always rooted in that chant, no justice, no peace. Like I don't know what a peace looks like that isn't rooted in justice. That anything else is something that I don't want to fight for. The second, I was reading something recently, I was doing a lot of work with HIV activists, and somebody brought up this quote by Dr. Krim, which was this idea that we allowed AIDS to happen. Like we allowed it to happen. That people ignored it for so long, that people didn't pay attention, that people had to do sort of intense things to get attention to a crisis that we knew was happening. And when I think about this notion of all the things that we allowed to happen, I'm mindful that it's not just HIV, but it's a host of things in the health space. It's certainly a host of things when we think about inequities in public education, when we think about inequities in the police. You know, I spend most of my time organizing around the police. People ask me, you know, like, what has the movement done in 4 years? And in some ways, it's like we have won the awareness battle. People are talking about police violence and mass incarceration in ways that they had never talked about before. But the outcomes actually haven't changed. And that's not due to us. It's like public education is a great example too. We talked about it. We've like redone everything we possibly could do. The outcomes still pretty bad. A lot of health spaces, we like had the new program. We did the new thing. Everybody went to a talk at the conference, and the outcomes are still really struggling. And this question for me is like, why is it like that? When I think about the police, I use as an example here, is in California, for instance, there's a law in California that says that any investigation of an officer that lasts more than a year can never result in discipline regardless of the outcome. That just doesn't make sense. In Cleveland, there's a rule that says that all disciplinary records of the police officers are destroyed every 2 years. That also just doesn't make sense. In Maryland, the law says that you can file an anonymous complaint against an officer for everything except brutality. And you're like, well, the game is the game. But this is just not, it doesn't make sense. And I think about that because in so many ways, there are these things operating at the structural level that hinder our ability for the outcomes to ever change. We have changed the conversation, but what does it look like for the outcomes to change? I have a podcast, and one of the things, this episode hasn't aired yet, but I was obsessed with this idea of like, why are kids still eating lead paint? Like, what is happening with lead? And as you know, probably there's no cure for lead, so the best we can do is therapy, and you already know that. But I was asking this expert, like, why are kids eating lead paint? And you probably know this, but I didn't know this. I didn't know that lead is naturally sweet. So when I found that out, I was like, if I didn't think it was a conspiracy before, I'm convinced it is now, right? That like, if you mandate that the housing projects have to use lead paint and lead is sweet, of course the kids think it's candy. And like, how do we start talking about the intentional things that we've done and that we've allowed to happen that lead to these outcomes that we know are bad? I was working with HIV activists in Baltimore. In Baltimore, we have a lot of issues around health. And it was this idea that people just didn't want to get tested, that people like didn't care about their health, and that feeds into this narrative where we blame people for being victims of something bigger. So we're having this conversation, and he was like, our research actually shows in cities like this, there's so many people who are worried about knowing somebody at the testing facility, like a cousin or like somebody they went to school with, they just don't want to go, not because they don't care about their health, but they want to make sure that it's still private. And it's like, that is fascinating, right? A different way to think about what the problem is that isn't blaming people for being victims in a larger context. And we started to brainstorm about like, how can we get around that problem? And there's so many issues in this space that we inadvertently blame people for being victims, and it's like, you didn't do this. I think about, I spent a lot of time in education. My sister's an elementary school principal now. I taught and did some other stuff. And we were talking the other day about how we don't teach handwriting anymore in schools. And when you say that to people, they often think it's like cursive, but it's like, no, we actually just don't teach handwriting. Literally what we do now in a lot of classrooms is that we show kids letters, like they see letters. They know the letters, they can read. And then we just hope that they know how to translate what they saw to paper. So like there's not tracing paper anymore in a lot of classrooms. And you're like, that just doesn't, like that's a choice, right? So we are allowing this to happen at scale. And you think about even reading, the single biggest predictor of a kid's reading level is actually their mother's reading level. And we actually have no scale solutions for adult literacy in this country. Like there's no, like good programs existing across the country, but nothing at scale. And the question is like, what do we do when we know these are the problems? And we think about it's never a matter of resources. If Trump just gave $700 billion to the military, it would take $125 billion to take every single person out of poverty. This is never a matter of resources, it's always a matter of will. And I'm obsessed with this idea of what are the things that we allow to happen. I'm also interested in the way that words are real power. That we think about the pen as mightier than the sword, but in some ways the pen itself is the sword. This idea of equality and equity, that equality is everybody gets the same thing, equity is that people get what they need and deserve, and the work of justice is almost always the work of equity. We're never asking for equal funding in school systems, we're asking for equitable funding. We know that it just costs more to educate kids in poverty and kids with special needs. We think about diversity and inclusion. Diversity is about bodies, inclusion is about culture. You find a lot of places, you hire 10 more black people, you can still have a racist business. You can hire 20 more trans members in the community and still have a transphobic culture. That people are doing well on the body count and doing bad on the culture piece. We even think about justice and accountability. That accountability is what happens after the trauma. Justice is the fact that people should never have to experience a trauma in the first place. And you think about some other words that we use, like third world countries. It's like there's only one world. There is one world. It might be a developing country, but there is one world. And we actually feed into this language that does damage to people. And how do we start to think about the language that we use? And when I think about this, I also think about what does it mean to tell the truth in public? I'm mindful that when people talk about truth and reconciliation, they forget that the truth comes before the reconciliation. I was in a space recently and I was wearing this shirt that said, white high school dropouts have more wealth than all black college graduates, which is true. That wealth gap is wild. And this guy comes up to me, he says, DeRay, well, you know, the reason white people have more wealth is because there are more white people. And I'm like, we're at this party, so I like don't know what to do. I'm like shocked. I'm like, what? and I say to him real calmly, I say, it's because you killed half the people and enslaved the other half. And he's like shocked again. And I'm like, he's like, I don't know if I agree. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know if you agree? It's like, it's like disagreement. Like, I don't know, you don't get to disagree about this. And there was this moment about like remembering that the truth is that white people didn't work hard for wealth. White people didn't all have to be small business owners and extraordinary to get wealth. The government literally gave white people wealth. We gave white people housing loans for 1%, interest on the loans. We gave white people free education. Like we did it. It's only when we start to think about poor people and people of color that suddenly everybody's imagination is gone. So like, we don't know how to do that. You're like, what you mean? We just did it, right? Or you think about even like the highway administration in Alabama. Literally, the White Citizens Council took over the highway administration, paved over the churches that organized in Montgomery. That like, we have a system, we know how we made wealth for white people in this country. You start to think about it for people of color, and literally people are like, everybody should be a small business owner. It's like, no, everybody doesn't have to be. People should be able to be lazy and unmotivated and eat dinner, right? Like, that is true. And how do we start to talk about this in the most plain way possible? They're like, I didn't do it, I didn't make this up, like, this is just what happened. And I think about the way that, like, again, this idea that the truth comes before the reconciliation. A lot of people who want to get to the reconciliation part without dealing with, like, how we got here in the first place. And again, I'm obsessed with this lead paint thing. I'm like, kids are eating paint. I was sort of like, who's not watching their kid? They're like, eating paint. Who's not watching the kids? And then it's like, the paint is candy. Of course the kids are eating it. Again, I'm like obsessed with that. But this idea of like, we allow these things to happen. And like, what happens when we know them, and how are we able to talk about them in public in ways that are honest, in ways that are true? You know, I'm also mindful that part of this work is like, how do we create internships for people? So I spend most of my time around the police. And, you know, if I start with most people being like, we can live in a world without the police, they're sort of like, I don't know. They're like, there's a lot of crime. You're like, okay, got it. But part of this is like, everybody needs like an entrance and an on-ramp. I think about my aunt. It's like, if I can't explain it to my aunt, then it doesn't matter. So the best thing, it's like, if I can't tell on me kind of think about it, then like, it doesn't matter. So when you think about Kavanaugh, this little thing with Kavanaugh, if I call on me to say Roe v. Wade, she's like, DeRay, don't call me about this. She just, that's like not her interest. She believes in a woman's right to choose, but Roe v. Wade is like not her interest to this. When I call on me and say, on me, they hide the papers. She's like, they hide the papers? I'm like, they're like, hide the papers? She's like, they can't hide the papers. And like, that is like my interest. And we can enter there and then talk about some other things. One of the things that I think the left does in a way that is not productive is that it's always elites to elites. Like, it's like this idea that everybody is watching CNN all day. And like, that just isn't the truth. That part of this is, how do we tell stories in ways that motivate everybody, that create interest for everybody in the world? People often ask me, why is the right so good at messaging? And I don't think the right is particularly great at messaging, but they are engaged in this idea of memory and recall. It's always bringing back things that we've already survived. Like, it's nostalgic messaging. So we've already gotten through Jim Crow once, and like, that is the dog whistling that's happening now. The hard part about the left is that we're always engaged in make-believe. That the best of us are always trying to paint a picture of a world that we've never seen before. So you think about a world of health equity and health access, you don't know what that looks like. You're like making it up. A world where everybody has access not just to healthcare, but high quality healthcare. You don't know. Like, we're making a healthcare for all. What does that look like? I don't know. You don't know. I don't know either, right? Like, what does it look like where every kid can read and write? You don't know. You've never seen that before. That some of the hardest part of our work is that we are telling stories about things that have never existed before. And we're trying to convince people to fight for that dream of something they've never seen. And that is just harder work. So it's not that they are better storytellers, it is that storytelling actually has a bigger consequence on our side. And part of that is, how do we tell stories in simple ways that allow people to enter and do their best work? And how do we also have the people that we're up against do more cognitive work than we do? I was on a panel once with a police officer, and she said to me, she's like, DeRay, it's a hard world, people commit a lot of crime. Are you saying that police should never kill somebody? And I said to her, well, tell me when the police should kill somebody you love. You have a kid, your kid's gonna make a mistake one day that's gonna impact other people negatively. Like, what would be the mistake that your kid could make that would be okay for a police officer to put a bullet through his head? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, you don't know, I don't know, right? Like, none of us know that, right? And if you don't want to go through that, then why should I make another parent go through that? And so much of our work is like, how do we put that? You know, people ask me about Mike Brown, they're like, did Mike Brown have his hands up? I don't know. But do you think that the penalty for jaywalking is death? Not convinced, right? And I say that because so much of this, especially when we're white about these issues, is that we become people who give the best speeches. Somebody says something, wow, we give a speech. They say no, we give another speech. They say, I don't know, we give a better speech. They shrug, and then we are exhausted, and they are unmoved. And part of our work is like, how do we put the cognitive burden on them? That too often we think about confrontation as like perpetual battle, but sometimes the best confrontation is asking the best question. It's saying like, what does a 4-year-old have to do to earn access to a dentist? What does a 6-year-old have to do to earn a checkup? Like, I don't know, right? Like, how do we force people to deal with this idea that like, of course kids should have like shelter. Of course every kid should eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And part of this is, how do we talk about this in the simplest terms as possible? I interviewed Ocasio-Cortez in the Bronx not too long ago, and after her win, people are like, she's a socialist, she's gonna up in democracy. And it's like, she is asking for pretty basic things, right? She's like, everybody should eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Seems pretty basic to me. Everybody should have shelter. Seems pretty basic to me. People should have access to K-12 education and higher education. Pretty basic to me. Sometimes, and I would say most of the time, the things that we're fighting for are pretty basic. But we are so emotional about them because there's so much at stake that we present them when we feed into the extremism and the polarization that the right benefits from. And we can start talking about this like really basically. Like everybody should be able to see a doctor when they want to. Pretty basic to me, right? Like, how do we start talking about this in the simplest terms that takes away the bite that feeds into the extremism? Because I think that will help us get to the other side and what that looks like. I think about this idea of the other side of freedom. I'm mindful that on this side of freedom, we know the outcomes, right? On this side of freedom, we arrest more people for weed than all violent crimes combined. On this side of freedom, a third of all the people killed by strangers killed by a police officer. On this side of freedom, you know that people might have access to healthcare, but the question becomes access to high quality healthcare. I went to urgent. I had a sore throat on Thursday, 3 Thursdays ago. I go to urgent care. I'm like, I think I have strep. The doctor says, he's like, open your mouth. He's like, you don't have strep. I'm like, just test me for strep. So he tests me, rapid comes negative. I'm like, I think I have strep. And he's like, you don't have strep. And I'm like, just send it away, right? Just do me a favor. He's like, I don't think we need to send it. I'm like, then I have to fight. I'm like, are you refusing to send the test away? And he's like, no. So we send it away. Sunday comes. I'm so weak that I literally with one hand can't press down the soda dispenser. I'm like, this law, I'm like done. I'm just very weak. So I go back and I'm making up stuff in the doctor's office to try and get penicillin because I'm convinced I have strep. I'm positive I have strep. So I go in and I'm like a 3-year-old, right? I'm sitting in the doctor's office and I literally say to the nurse, I'm like, I have syphilis. This is I'm like, my apartment just has a copy for syphilis. I'm make it nice. But I know that it's penicillin. And she's like, sir, and I'm like, I know I have strep. And they won't give me penicillin. So I'm literally just make this up. They won't give me penicillin, so I storm out like a 3-year-old. I'm like, I take all my stuff back, and I'm like, I can't believe you would treat me. Monday morning, I'm done. I can't really move. I go to the doctor's, and the doctor is like, you need to go to the emergency room. And I'm like, I think I have strep. So I'm like, I don't think I need to go to the emergency room. And then literally at noon, urgent care calls me back, and they're like, you have strep. And I'm like, I told you. I think about that often because it's this moment of if I hadn't been able to just cancel my calendar for 4 days, I knew what I had, I got amoxicillin, I was like, I don't need amoxicillin, just give me a shot. If I didn't know how to navigate the system well enough, I would have been in a very different position in that moment. But it was literally I had to fight him to even send the test away because he was like, you don't have it. And it's I think about all the privilege I have to be able to do that and think about all the people who don't know how to navigate the system in that way. And systems shouldn't be things that we have to navigate, they should just work. And we think about all the programs that exist. I believe in programs. I'm also mindful that most of the programs that exist because the system failed in the first place, right? So programs are important. The majority of them, we shouldn't need 900 after-school programs. The reason why we need all these after-school programs is because you didn't learn how to read during the school day, right? There are a lot of things that we should make the system and never let the system off the hook for being responsible for things at scale. And I'm mindful of that. The last thing I'll say is that people ask me all the time, what am I doing to reach across the aisle? And I tell them, I'm trying to build the biggest choir. And if any of you have ever been in a choir, you know that being in the choir is not a passive thing. If you've ever been in a church choir, for sure, it's a whole lot of work, a whole lot of rehearsals, a whole lot of everything. Is that in the choir is about going to rehearsal, it's about learning the best song, it's about learning how to sing together, and singing for something bigger than you. And what I know is that in the congregation there are always people who don't yet know that they have a voice, they don't yet believe that they can sing, but part of our work is to say, you have a voice, I just want you to join the choir. I want you to stand with me and sing a song bigger than you can sing alone. I want you to come to rehearsal and learn new music. I want you to push us and challenge us to sing something that we've never seen before. That to me, I think, is a part of our work. And I'm not spending my time trying to convince people who never want to sing, who hate the choir. I know that the numbers are actually on our side, but there are a lot of people who just don't believe yet that they can be a part of the choir. And part of our work is to tell people, you got it. Part of the work of organizing is to say to people, you already have a voice and you had a voice when I met you. I just want to help you find that voice and sing the best song you can ever sing. I think about being a teacher, what the best teachers do is walk into classrooms and say, you had the gift before I got here. And what I'm trying to do is help you find the gift every single day long after I'm gone. What the worst teachers do is tell kids that the gift only exists in their presence. And part of our work is to remind people in communities and in neighborhoods that you already have the gift. When we think about social justice, the term itself is redundant in some ways, that there is no justice that is not social. That justice necessarily means how we live in community with each other. And I'll leave you with this quote. I did this panel once with a pastor, and he's a great pastor, and I had to listen to a lot of his sermons to prepare for it. And he has this question. He says, if God answered all your prayers, would it just change you or would it change the world? And I think about that often because there's some of us who dream, and our biggest dream is actually not a dream to change the world. But the dream of justice always has to be a dream bigger than us. It has to be a dream about how everybody can benefit in a bigger way. How to create pathways so the outcomes are different. How do we make sure that it's not just access, but access to something that matters, right? Like you take a lot of homeless people, give them the houses that are burning, they're still homeless. That's not access, right? That doesn't matter. And how do we start to talk about the truth in public around race and justice in ways that make sense? It's understanding that the truth has to come before reconciliation. It's good to be here.
So happy that you all are here. We're going to get into a bit of a Q&A. DeRay said that he wanted to speak shorter than typical and then have a real discussion with you all in the room. So we have 20 minutes to ask questions from the audience. The Sente is going to be carrying this mic around. And I'm going to kick us off with the first question. So DeRay, I would love to thank you for your comments. Very inspirational. I'm really curious to really drill down into the healthcare system a little bit more. So, the healthcare system, a lot of folks in this room actually are really wrestling with this idea of how do we eliminate these racial inequities that have been persistent for so many decades, and how do we address institutional racism. One proposal that's on the table, Senator Kamala Harris in California has a proposal in front of Congress, a bill in front of Congress to essentially require that providers take implicit bias training in the medical system in California. Also to institutionalize that within the medical school system as a part of the curriculum, and then also to incentivize work around eliminating racial inequities. Specifically, she's interested in the infant mortality and the maternal mortality gap that's out there. Do you think that's a good idea, this sort of notion of working at that implicit bias piece? If not, what are the other sort of interventions we could explore in the healthcare system specifically?
Yeah, so I used to be, most of the time I used to be the chief of human capital in the school system in Baltimore, so I managed most things that dealt with adults, including our healthcare plans. So we have about 20,000 subscribers on our plans. We employ as many people as the city of Baltimore itself, and that as many people in our plans as the city. And it's like one of the richest plans in the country, literally the high copay. It's a $5 copay. We cover all services, and the most our employees pay is $10 out of network anywhere in the country. It's like a wild plan. It's costing us $600, but great plan for our employees. And I think about being in those meetings with providers, it was such a different way to think about healthcare because I never sat in the room before. And I remember one meeting, we had a lot of conversations around, get you implicit bias, we had a lot of conversations about mobility diseases, like most of our medication was for mobility issues. And we were trying to figure out how do we get people to walk in neighborhoods that they don't feel safe in. Like what does that even look like, right? Like if you can't walk around your school, or like there's not a walking, we can't do that, or if we aren't gonna get 11,000 Fitbits for people, like how do we actually brainstorm around mobility? And we would call in like the best providers. So Care First came in, we had Hopkins come in, and what we realized is that there was nobody equipped to help us think about how do we do wellness when we don't just have one building? Like nobody could do it. We have 200 buildings, right? So like, not having one Zumba class for 11,000 people, that's a draw. That is weird, right? So we sit in the room and like, it was this reminder that there are a lot of people who like, when I had questions about medication or like those sort of things, the people who supported us were brilliant. But when we were trying to figure out like, how do we bring wellness to people and not make people come to wellness, it was actually just like nobody had solutions for it. So we spent a long time trying to figure that out. The thing about implicit bias, and I'm sensitive to like people's love of implicit bias, people talk about like unconscious bias too, is that some of this stuff is really conscious and we're letting people off the hook. So like you think about the Starbucks incident, I don't know what the unconscious part are calling the police on 2 black guys. It's like, what was unconscious about that? That seemed pretty conscious to me, right? So accepting, I worry about how we allow people to get off the hook. So when we think about some of the disparities that show up in healthcare, it's I just refuse to believe that doctors and nurses know they're not listening to Black patients. I'm not convinced that people I didn't know that person's Black. I just don't, I'm not there yet. And I think that there is something about how do we force people to deal with equity and how do we measure things? What does it look like to measure the testing that we do for people? What does it look like to measure how much time people spend with patients and give that feedback back to people? I think about with teachers, one of the things that we do in the back of classrooms is really interesting is we can sit in the back of classrooms and we can tally the number of positive to negative statements that teachers make in classrooms, and it is one of the best predictors of behavior in somebody's classroom because you just see what culture looks like. Because if you're only saying negative things to kids, they actually start to be negative because that's what you're being, and that's interesting. So those things, implicit bias, I think makes sense. It's sexy. The data on whether it actually matters is questionable. And I think that we do let people off the hook by assuming that every single thing that happened was unconscious, as opposed to saying there's a problem here with race. The second thing I'd say is what does it look like to be more intentional about recruitment for doctors of color and nurses of color? I don't think I've ever had a person of color be my doctor except for my dentist. I had 2 dentists who were Black. But nobody I've ever experienced in the traditional healthcare system has been Black, and it's sort of a hard cultural moment. And the third thing I'd say is I'm interested in this is probably because I was chief of capital, is some of the boring stuff around scheduling is we had a lot of people who would have gone to the doctor if they could have gotten an appointment earlier. And we worked really hard with our providers. We had Care First, Kaiser had a small percentage of our people. And you'd be shocked at the battles we had around how do we just get people into places. I remember the first time I ever got tested, I hadn't even had sex. And it literally took me 3 weeks. And I was well, if I actually was nervous, this would have been, this actually would have been a bad outcome, right? And I think about, I had all the privilege to leave work when I wanted to and do those things. And we struggled a lot at the system level trying to do that. The last thing I'll say is I went through the spirit of being obsessed with urgent care in general at the system level. And our providers, for instance, we wanted to send a mailing to everybody who gone to an emergency room the year before. Just a mailing that was here are urgent cares in your neighborhood, right? Because our plan was so rich that we covered the most you're going to pay us $5 anyway, but the emergency rooms were costing us a lot of money. And we probably worked on the mailing for a year only for the providers to be I don't know if we can do it. And we're actually trying to think about this in an innovative way, and we didn't see the space set up to do it in an innovative way.
Thank you. Thanks, DeRay. All right, so who's got the next question in the crowd? I think, Vicente, did you? No. Let's see, who wants to stand up? We have time. All right. I've got a mic here. Vicente will focus on this side of the room.
Hi.
Hello.
So you're talking about holding people accountable, and you're also talking about limiting the polarization of people. I agree with that wholeheartedly, and what I see as part of the limitations is our inability to be vulnerable. You look at this entire room, and what's the likelihood that any of you would turn to your partner right next to you and tell them something that you're really terrible at? Or being in a professional setting where you're saying, help me, I'm not good at that, right? It's so contrary to our culture and what we talk about, even those of us who are really far left or really far right. We're not really owning what we're not good at. Therefore, it's very difficult to hold people accountable without that polarization effect. So in my own work, and I'm curious what you think, how do we shift that paradigm? How do we really push people to bring what we can? Everybody talks about StrengthsFinder and all of these types of things, but how do we create a world where people are okay with what they're not good at, but are still leaning in to get better at it? Because I see that as a key essential part to what you're talking about in terms of how are we shifting, how are we addressing implicit bias. It's more than just a conversation and kind of going through the motions. It's about authenticity and being genuine in our circles.
Yeah, so 3 things come to mind. I'm not convinced about the implicit bias thing in general, but I think some of that is how do we give people feedback that we know is right, even when it's tough feedback. And what happens in some of the circles, like the industry circles, like the healthcare space, the education space, is a lot of people came up in the space together. And when you see things that are wrong, you're just like you're like nervous about calling out your friend that you work with for 30 years, right? So like they know that thing didn't make sense, but they're like, well, I'm like the godmother of their kid, and you're like, that still didn't make sense, right? And like we have to be more comfortable with that sort of stuff. I think about in the healthcare meetings I led as the chief of capital. I think about certainly in education. Like it was hard to say like you just can't. That's not right, right? Or like the way that you did that had an adverse impact, and like we got to talk about that. And like leaning into this comfort of that, I think is actually really important. Which is different from like always having the self-reflection, but it is like we often see things around us that don't make sense, and we don't name them. And I think we have to start being more comfortable about doing that, and not doing it in a like I'm yelling at you way, but in a like this just doesn't make sense, right? The second is some people do have a hard time seeing things that they don't experience. So I think about I was with somebody the other day who was like, "Do I believe in intersectionality? I get the word, but like I don't." He's like, "I think I'm struggling." And I was saying to him like, "Tell me the last time you felt unsafe." And he was like, the last time I felt unsafe in my body was this incident with the police. And I was like, if you ask the majority of women the last time they felt unsafe in their body, it probably has nothing to do with the police, right? And like it was being catcalled, or it was being touched, or it was being like, and he was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that before. You're like, yeah, like you have only felt unsafe like one time in the past 3 months. That's wild, right? Like as a gay black man, I can think about a million times where I felt unsafe. And he was just like, no, I like hadn't thought about it like that, right? But there's that question about like, how do we create entrances for people into this work? When we think about some of the healthcare stuff, it's like, what did when we work with some of the HIV activists, it's like, what did you have to do to go get tested? Like, just map out the process for me, right? And when you have people like map out the different ways, like they start to see like, for some people it was super easy, and for some people it's like a wild process, right? And like those are things that there's not like a natural time that comes up at dinner where you're like, hey, when did you go get tested? Like, that doesn't just come up. But like, how do we start to normalize the fact that we share the way that we experience systems so people stop thinking that they're the only one? Because what you find is that like a lot of people are experiencing the same thing, but like we don't have a language to talk about that anymore. Like, how do we start to build that? I'm interested. I will believe that this room has had a range of experiences that could change healthcare really quickly, right? But how do we share those in ways that actually are building power and building people's capacity to do better work? I think that is like a harder question to do. And some of this too is like, how do we convince people that they're worthy of it? That was like a big thing that we had in Baltimore, is that like, I'm trying to get, as you know, men don't get physicals. And we're like looking at the data and we're like trying to do everything to convince people to get physicals. And some of it was like convincing people that like, you can do something about your health, that like you should go to the hospital, like, or you should go to a doctor before your limb falls off. Like you should just go get a checkup. And they're like, really? You're like, yes, or like go to the dentist. We're telling people to get their kids' teeth sealed. And they're like, why would I get my kids' teeth sealed? And it's like, how do we start to normalize these things as like not just part of some random wellness program, but just a part of what it means to be like an adult and alive, you know what I mean? Like we were struggling to figure that out in Baltimore, and I've seen a lot of communities struggle to figure that out as well at scale. There are a lot of great like individual things helping 50 people at a time. It's like the scaled solution is what I'm most nervous about.
I think we have a question over here. First, I want to say thank you for being here. I really appreciate you being a black man and being out and talking about different things that you care about. I really do. You talked about inclusion and intersectionality. Sometimes I feel like these words sometimes limit critical conversations about specific identities, and because people want to expand conversation where there might be a solution directly for a particular group, and they use inclusion and intersectionality to expand it and lose that specific intentionality.
Yeah, so we think about, what people are confused about intersectionality is that intersectionality is not about intersecting identities, it's about intersecting systems of oppression. And like people confuse that all the time. So they're like, I am a white man. And it's like, well, where's the oppression, right? Like that is about like two identities coming together, but like being white isn't, you're not oppressed as a white person, and men aren't really oppressed in that moment, right? So like, that doesn't fit the framework that we use the word to think about in those ways. And like I think people, that does become this pivot that is like a real challenge for people. We have to be more comfortable focusing on specific pockets of like specific communities and saying like what are solutions for those in a way that I think we have. And I think that what is promising is that we're talking about the trans community in public in ways that we've never done before. Like that was 5 years ago, we were not at the place that we're at today, and like that is really powerful. And you do see people like creating specific solutions for communities and inviting people impacted by those communities, like to actually be a part of the solution building. And I think that that is really promising. I'm mindful though that like this work gains the most traction when it is the most public. And like people realize that like they can all be a part of these conversations and we don't just hide them. You know, when I work with HIV activists, like we're always trying to figure out like, how do we talk to more people about like why they do and don't get tested and like what would they change, right? Knowing that like if we had the answer then we would have figured it out already, but we don't. And there's so many people who like they get to this really incredible position as the chief of something or the head of something and they feel like they no longer have to ask the question. And like it's those people that need to ask the most questions, right? Because they have the most power to make change. And I've been in a lot of rooms where those are the least curious people. And that worries me, right? So like how do we have the people with a lot of power continue to be like the most curious so they can help us think about how these things come together and like what that means. And that focusing on specific communities doesn't take away from our overall goal of equity and justice.
I think we have time. Arthur, we have time for 2 more questions, so if you can do one and then we'll pass the mic to Senator Fields.
Perfect. Thank you for your talk. I think the power of your words comes from the actions that you've taken. So, as you've taken those actions, as you've met these people, as you've been introduced to folks, and as you've moved throughout different communities, what do you find is an effective way to have conversations with people? You talked about truth and reconciliation, truth coming first. The first conversation has to be about that truth. Your truth, my truth, the truth of the people around the table. What are the effective ways that you found to have those conversations about each other's truth?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple things. One is, again, like this idea of creating injections and on-ramps for people. It's like my aunt is always my aunt Meg is like always my bar. It's like, I just interviewed with this senator not too long ago, and she was talking about some childcare thing that I sort of got, and all I could think about every time she opened her mouth was like, I cannot repeat this to my aunt. Like, I literally don't know what I'm telling her, like, I just don't know. And not because I don't understand, because like, I just don't. And I was like, what are you saying? And Aunt Meg definitely don't know. So, this idea of like entrances is like, for a lot of people, it is starting with the like, what do you want, what do you believe, like that sort of thing, and then building from there. So when I think about police and communities, I'm like, well, what do you need to be safe? You know, and they're like, they need these things. And it's like, well, do you really need that? Or do the police really need a gun to get the cat out of the tree, right? Like pushing people with these questions, right, and like help them think about the world differently. You know, with the police too, it's like this, you know, people press me and I'm like, you know, we literally slit people's wrists for 2,000 years and call it healthcare. We were like draining people's blood and we're like, their blood pressure went down. You're like, of course it went down. That's not a solution. And like helping people make parallels are like, I think we're in a similar moment with the police, right? Like, how do we do that sort of work that is not as jarring to people but creates like a train of yes? I'm always trying to create this train where you're like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. But so by the time I get you to this place of like, do we need the police? You're like, I don't know. And I'm like, I don't know either, right? But that is like the train work. A lot of people sort of start at the end and like that just isn't always successful. So I think about some of the access issues in healthcare or like some of the equity things. It's like, what does a 5-year-old have to do to earn the right to a dentist? And people are like, well, no, I think the 5-year-old should just have a dentist. I'm like, me too. And it's like, well, what does a 30-year-old person have to do to deserve to see a doctor? And they're like, I don't know. I think you're like I'm trying to create this chain where people are like, that makes a lot, that's really basic. And it's like, yes. So then I can get them to this idea of like free healthcare. Because like I've actually worked this chain up enough, you know, whereas I start with free healthcare, they're worried about how to pay for it and all this other stuff. I'm not trying to do that, right? I'm trying to get them with this yes train. And like that I think is like an interesting thing. And that like is what I found to be successful. If you think about the difference between Bernie and Hillary in the election, it's like what Bernie did really well is like he focused on the what. He sort of like fudged the how. You're like, how Bernie? He didn't really know. But the what, he nailed the what. He's like, I'm gonna free everybody in jail. You're like, you would be president. Everybody's not in federal jail. He's like, free them. And you're like, okay. But like it helped people see a vision of what the world could be, right? Hillary, the how was perfect. Her how was strong. It was the what that people were like, I just don't know, right? I even think about 2020, this question of like, who might run against the current president? It's like, anybody who runs just against him won't win. The person who runs for a bigger vision of America, that person will win, right? Because when we run against things, we're only as big as the thing we're up against. And so many of us are always up against something. That's our thing. We're like against the people that like don't believe in free healthcare. We're against the people. We're actually not thinking about a vision that is like much bigger than that. So when I think about how to talk to people, I'm always trying to build this chain where they're like, yes. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And like, then I get them to this thing that like would have been crazy to start with, but by the end they're like, that makes sense. I'm like, that does make a lot of sense. You're like, that's like I'm always trying to lean into, especially with like the hard things, you know.
DeRay, welcome to Colorado. It's exciting to have you here.
Good to be here.
Now, I work at the state capitol in the Senate, and I really appreciated what you had to say in reference to no justice, no peace. You talked a lot about diversity, inclusion, and equity, and equality. And so at the state level, to fund government in Colorado, it's about $6 billion. But yet 1/6 of our budget goes to corrections and incarceration, prison, our judicial branch, and those kinds of things. And when you're spending that kind of money on corrections, we're not investing that much in our school funding program or in healthcare. So I'm wondering what thoughts and ideas you have as it relates to how do we build a sustainable funding model that adequately funds our schools and our hospitals, not only in our urban centers, but also in our rural location. Right now in Colorado, we spend $38,000 per year to incarcerate. And we're spending about $7,300 per pupil for funding. So how do we shift that funding model to make sure, like you mentioned, that every child knows how to read by the time they're in the 3rd grade?
Yeah, think about, so I spent a lot of time thinking about this issue, and what I've come to conclude is that we take for granted how, like people, like it's not a rational argument anymore, like the numbers thing actually doesn't move people. Like the numbers are so clear that like that should just be obvious, but it isn't for people. Because there are a lot of people who can't imagine being safe without the presence of jails and police. Like their idea of safety is so deeply embedded, and it is like a societal thing. Raise your hand if you saw Zootopia, the movie Zootopia. Nice, good crowd. Raise your hand if you saw Bad Boys. Most people should have seen like much older Bad Boys. There are less people who saw Bad Boys than Zootopia. So I bring up Bad Boys and Zootopia because in both of those movies, in Zootopia it's the rabbit who's like she's like the main police officer, the like bad guy stole the onion, if you remember. And there's a scene in Zootopia where she's chasing the bad guy, and literally she's like running through people's neighborhoods. She like, goes through like miniature neighborhoods, she's like plowing over people jumping out of the way. Like that's wild. And Bad Boys, they are literally shooting into crowds. Like he's like just shooting into crowds. Like the cars plowing over people. And you saw Bright, which is on Netflix, which is not a good movie, but Bright. The opening scene of Bright, they're in the bodega and they're just knocking people over, and it's this incredible meditation on like we have actually like culturally seeded this idea that the police can sort of do whatever they want as long as it keeps us safe. Like it's like in even Zootopia, which is sort of a wild thing. So when I think about this question about like how do we actually reprioritize, some of it is not just the work of like legislators, but it is also the work of our storytellers and the way that we like have these messages of like what actually keeps us safe. Like what I believe is that people who have access to resources are like safer than not, right? That like people who know where their next meal is coming from are like safer, like they make different choices, right? And, like that's not the way that we often tell the story in public or writ large, so I think that's one. The second is, there is a question of like in communities, how do we just ask people like what do you need, like what makes you feel safe and what keeps you safe? And what I would posit, those are two different things. The police make people feel safe, they do. People going to jail makes people feel like there's a consequence. Like, are you actually safer? Like, they're questionable, but like when you ask people, you get to that, and we have confused like consequence and punishment. Like consequence is about change, punishment's about pain. And we built a system that's largely rooted in pain, right? That we want people to like rot in a small closet because like we want them to make amends for the bad thing they did. The thing is, they're gonna get out at some point and like be no more change than they were going in, and like that's not necessarily a productive thing. And the third thing I say too is like just remembering how much of an industry this is, and I'm convinced that if we kill the industry, the rest of it will die. So I was emailing with somebody who's incarcerated like a week ago. And every time we email, I think if you use JPay, which is like one of the biggest providers of email in prisons and jails, I have to buy an electronic stamp to send an email. And every time I buy an electronic stamp, I'm pissed, right? Like, why am I buying an electronic stamp? Like, I don't even know what that means. And the thing about the stamps is that they are actually, you have to buy enough stamps to buy like the word count, because it's like per page of the email. And you're like, if I haven't seen a scam before, this is a scam, right? You got me. And the even wilder part of the scam is that like, you can like pre-buy a stamp for the person you're sending an email to. So like really every email is really 2 stamps. And like a book of stamps is $3, but these are emails, they're not like real things, right? And it's like, there's an industry behind this, right? And like the more and more we help people see the industry behind it, I believe that actually gets us closer to ending all of it. And people don't see that. Like you wouldn't know that unless you had to do it. I didn't know it, and I know a lot about the system. And then I had to email him. I got this thing, they're like, here's the email. I'm like, I'm gonna email him back. And I was like, $3. I was like, a book of stamps for $3 is an email? Like that is, what a scam, right? But so much of our work is like peeling back the layers so people see how the smaller things accumulate. I even think about like, if I ask you what is a felon or what's a felony, most people would say things like robbery, like your grand theft, or like murder or something like that. In Florida, to this day, theft over $300 is a felony. And when you become a felon, you permanently lose the right to vote in Florida, which is wild. In Virginia, up until this year, theft over $200 was a felony. And in Virginia, you permanently lose the right to vote. In Oklahoma, up until 2001, theft over $50 was a felony. And you permanently. So like, if you think about those things, you're like, people made this up, right? So when we say the system is broken, and people say, oh no, it's working exactly like it was designed, my takeaway from that is that it was designed, right? People made this up. And like, it wasn't necessarily the brightest people in the world making it up. And because they made it up, we can actually make something work. So when I see the tax code being rewritten on the back of scrap paper, it's like, don't tell me we can't do this in a generation, right? Like literally, they didn't even read the tax bill. Like it was on the back of scrap paper. So like, no, this doesn't have to be a 100-year solution. We can actually do this in a lifetime. And part of that is like us believing and like imagining that something can be different. And I'll tell you, I've been in a lot of prisons and jails, and I was in the youth prison in Oregon. And in Oregon, they have this law that if you commit a felony at 15, 16, or 17, you're automatically charged as an adult with a minimum sentence of 5 years. So like everybody in this jail is young. And I'm like trying to help them understand that like a crime is really just like an action with a consequence, right? Like somebody like said this thing is bad and put some sort of consequence. And they were like, I don't know, they just thought it was like divine. And you're like, no, somebody made this up, right? Like, they might have made it up a long time ago, but like, this is made up, right? And like that to me is always our reminder that like we can actually redo all of this. And none of this has to be a 10 lifetime solution. Like it will require us to believe that it's possible and to like really fight. And again, the people that we're up against are like the most imaginative people in the game. Like their imagination is working overtime. So you even think about now, it's like there are people working to end the penalties on non-violent crimes, which is like a good thing. You're like, yes, that's good. At the same time, what they're doing really quietly is that they're actually recategorizing a whole set of non-violent crimes as violent. So like, that's not a win, but that is like strategically brilliant. We know it's bad, but it's brilliant. And it's like, how do we start to play the game in a way that actually leads to outcomes that like really help people? Like I don't know, I'm hopeful that we get there quicker than we are. Boom. It's great to be here, really.
DeRay Mckesson on our stage. It's kind of a dream come true for us to celebrate progress. I want to thank DeRay again. He's going to come and join us here for the program where we give the awards out now. So, this is one of my favorite times of the year. Right now, we get to honor some of the most amazing leaders in Colorado. Right now, we've been giving these awards for actually several years now. And this year, we decided to restructure the awards because we used to have categories where we felt like it kind of placed people in boxes and it limited our ability to honor the people that all the people who got nominated. So this year we restructured our awards to be the Health Equity Champion Awards. Every year we're going to be giving 3 Health Equity Champion Awards and 1 Lifetime Achievement Award. So today we want to honor actually 5 incredible leaders. We already broke our new rule because there were so many nominations. We had a record number of nominations this year because there's so much good work happening in community. And so these awards really are to honor community members who are doing incredible work, healthcare executives and executives of nonprofits, community organizers, healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, front desk staff, etc., and advocates as well. So just to remind y'all, the awards also come with a donation to the nonprofit of choice. So everybody's going home with a nice gift to a nonprofit, and we are going to get into the awards now. So I think Aubrey Hill, our Director of Health System Change, is coming up to give our first 2 awards.
Hi everyone. I have the honor of presenting the first 2 awards today. I'm so grateful that I've had the opportunity to work with these 2 individuals and see them shine as they work to make the world a better place. So the first Health Equity Champion is an incredible advocate for immigrants and refugees. She's a multilingual pediatrician. She provides supportive, loving, culturally responsive care to our children, many of whom are facing traumatic life circumstances due to their family's immigration statuses. She is also an outspoken advocate for immigrant and refugee issues, promoting humane health policies. She once reflected to me what the white coat symbolizes. It's not only a responsibility to care for your patients the best way you can, but it's also a symbol of power. People listen when you wear the white coat. So it's really important that you use that to your advantage to make change. She inspires many others in the medical field to speak out to use their white coat as a force for greater good. She was a lead author on the American Academy of Pediatrics Clinical Guidelines of Refugee Health. Her nominee wrote to us that she is a true force of nature. She is always at the ready to shine a light on the issues that we all need to be paying attention to. So it is my pleasure to announce that the Health Equity Champion of 2018 is Dr. Janine Young with Denver Health and the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Thank you so much, and for everybody in this room. I'm honored to be here. I open a lot of talks these days with the following phrase, which is, we live in crazy times. But the positive in this is the crazy has brought us all together in this room, has brought some really unlikely people who are now working together, and actually who I chose to donate my money to, which is to ROMAIN, the Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network. Whoever thought that a doctor would donate to lawyers? So I'll make this brief, but one of the reasons why we did this is because I'm the medical director of the refugee clinic, and I see refugees. I saw a Somali family this morning whose relatives are now banned to come to this country. I see unaccompanied children, undocumented children who've been separated from their parents. We live in crazy, crazy times. I tell my children that we're working to change all this, and I think everyone in this room is doing that. So because of that, after the election, we came together with physicians, other medical providers, and lawyers, and actually managed to get Denver Health to approve the opening of a human rights clinic, which is now just starting. And what we're doing is unsiloing efforts between all of us, between medical providers and lawyers and activists, to provide medical and psychologic forensic exams for undocumented adults and children who actually have legal rights to be in this country but don't know it. And their providers don't know it, and we don't know how to triage these patients or clients in the emergency room. So how do we start getting our hospital systems to appropriately triage patients who have no access to healthcare, talking about health equity? And when I see a patient who is undocumented, and Dr. Cervantes is going to bring this up as well, my hands are tied to provide care. And so if I can get them legal status, which they have a right to, then I can get them health care, I can get them housing, and I can actually do my job. So I really, really appreciate this award, and I look forward to collaborating with people in this room and to continue to unsilo all the efforts that we have had over the years and to fight and to move forward and not backwards. So thank you so much.
So the next health equity champion is another leading advocate for better medical care for immigrants in the country. She's led important research to demonstrate the human and financial cost of dialysis policies on immigrant communities. She's been an outspoken advocate for health care issues that affect immigrant families. She puts her patients first every day. She is an inspiration to many and reminds us all to walk through our lives as more compassionate, more empathetic people who carry the stories that we've been told, and we are propelled forward by change that we think is possible. Healthcare is often a place where we lose humanity because the system is so complex, but she makes it her life's mission to bring that humanity back into medicine. She inspires many in her work has gained national attention and put Colorado's health equity work on a big stage. She strikes you as a gentle spirit when you first meet her, but don't be fooled. She is a fighter. For those who have been marginalized by society, she does not give up. So it's my pleasure to present this Health Equity Champion Award to Dr. Lilia Cervantes of Denver Health.
Thank everyone, because we're all partners on this. And as Janine said, these are tough times, but it is bringing us together. And so I want to start off by thanking Aubrey and Tracy Johnson for being my partners on this. You guys have made this work so much fun, and words cannot tell. I so appreciate it too. I want to thank my husband and children for being spontaneous and for their love and energy. And lastly, I want to thank my patient, Hilda. Hilda was my inspiration to pursue this work. Hilda was an undocumented immigrant with end-stage renal disease who suffered because she could only access dialysis when critically ill once a week. She had 2 young boys. She passed away on Mother's Day in 2014, but her spirit lives on through this work. And I am just excited to continue this work and to continue to fight for those most vulnerable. Thank you.
All right. We're gonna keep going with that positive energy. A couple people, when they were walking in the doors today, told me they come to this event every year because it fills up their cup. It sort of gets them motivated to continue to do this hard work. You know, the stories that we're hearing are exactly that, DeRay's message. So the next award is coming. JC Montoya Price, one of our newest board members, is going to come up and introduce our third award.
I'm thrilled to be here today to honor someone I long admired. She's perfect. She's the epitome of a community organizer and advocate. In Yuma, Colorado, when they noticed that teen pregnancy rates weren't going down at the same rate as they were in other parts of the state, the Rural Community Resource Center brought together a group of young women to learn more and to see what they could do to end that. When the girls came to the meeting and said, actually what what we care about is in-state tuition because we don't have documentation and we can't go to college without that. Our awardee, Margot Eversole, said, okay, let's work on in-state tuition. She, as I talked to some of the young women who've been in Estrellas over the years since 2005, is the type of person who shows these young women that they have a voice. And not only that, they can join the choir, but that they can lead the choir. They've become leaders in their own community around immigrant rights issues, around sense of community, and building safe spaces for kids to play. In the words of one former Estrella, Daisy Jurado, Margot gave us the power to believe we can change the world, and these young women really have. Back in the early days of in-state tuition, their legislators were against it, but due to Margot's leadership and the young women who went to the Capitol each year and fought tirelessly, their legislators eventually voted in support of in-state tuition. Margot really embodies the values of health equity because she meets the young women where they are and learns from them where they want to take things and what change they want to make in their community. And she is taking the lead from the people most impacted. She isn't saying, I'm the grown-up here and you need birth control, you need sex ed. She's learning from them that actually what they needed in order to feel motivated and inspired to look to a bright future was to have access to in-state tuition, and they've continued to fight. Margot brings the young women to Denver for things like the Cirque Assembly or Latino Advocacy Day, and some of the young women I talked to said that exposure coming from Yuma down to Denver enabled them to feel confident going to college here in Denver, to take on new opportunities, new risks and challenges. So I'm really grateful to be able to honor Margot for all she's done for the young women in Yuma, for what she's done for the people across the state, and I am still going to plug and hope that she can help replicate the program, because I think what comes to her very organically in taking the lead from the girls is what all of us could do to model our programs after and make sure that we're centering the voices of the most impacted and that we're really building a bigger choir rather than just singing ourselves.
Easily, so I'll just say thank you.
All right, two more. I get to introduce these folks because I know them fairly well. Our fourth health equity champion is the kind of strong leader who I really aspire to be. She's really laser focused on the mission of her organization, which serves a critical function in our community to expand and improve the health and well-being of African Americans in Colorado. I know when Deidre left her previous job, everybody was sort of sitting on the edge of their seat saying, "What? I wonder what she's going to do, what she's going to get into." And she's really, gone full steam ahead at the Center for African American Health and transformed the organizational culture during a transitional time with really big shoes to fill when Grant Jones retired, and has made courageous decisions that require personal and professional sacrifice. And now Center for African American Health continues to be seen as a leader, providing critical education screenings and classes to really reduce health inequities among African American population in Colorado, and also starting to dip their toe in policy change and policy advocacy, which we're really excited to see where that heads. Our last community health equity champion, is Deidre Johnson, CEO of Center for African American Health.
Thank you so much. Even walking into this room, it was like a reunion. There's so many different people I ran into that I've known for years. Feeling very blessed and fortunate. My plus one is my little sister, my ride or die, my village. I think someone asked me the other day, what drives you? Being a mom of young African American boys drives me, who are 14 and 15 and walking through the world and we want to make it a better world where they can feel safe. A few years ago we lost our dad, but one of the things he said to me from a very early age was, you know what, The difference between white kids and kids of color is that white kids are raised with expectation. Kids of color are just left to rely on hope. And so the object of anything you do is to turn hope into expectation for our kids. And that's what I'm working toward, that's what I'm trying to do. So thank you so much.
All right, so our last award is the Gary Vander Ark Lifetime Achievement Award, named after our founder of our organization, Dr. Gary Vander Ark. This Lifetime Achievement Award winner is truly a legend in Colorado. He's been around, founded, and now leads one of Colorado's premier safety net clinics, founded it back in 1993. And Clinic Tepeyac is really a model for others across the state to strive to emulate. It served tens of thousands of uninsured, underinsured, Latino Coloradans and all Coloradans, and really has driven reduction in health disparities that we've seen in the communities that they work in. He's a master collaborator. If any of you have worked with Jim, you know he can bring people together from all sorts of backgrounds and really drive people to action. He's brought together health, community, government organizations over the years many times. I've been lucky to sit in some of those rooms with Jim and see sort of the passion and fire he lights under people. He's a key leader in Denver's medical and health equity community and speaks out specifically. One of the reasons why we're so excited to honor him is he speaks out about the root causes of health inequities. He really moves the conversation to what we've been talking about today, social determinants of health, systemic oppression, social justice, and doesn't just focus on the healthcare walls. He's heavily involved in policy advocacy, and whenever we start a new campaign, we're sure to reach out to him. And we know he's there to support and put Clinic Tepeyac's name behind our efforts, and he's a true servant leader. I think much of Colorado's health system is still sort of wrestling with how do we provide the most culturally appropriate healthcare to Latino population in Colorado, Latinx population, and Clinic Tepeyac's been doing it for decades now, with dignity, integrity, quality, and they continue to expand and don't turn anybody away. It's such a model, and Jim is the true leader of that model that we're honored to honor today. Jim Garcia, CEO and founder of Clinic Tepeyac, is our life.
Just looking out at the audience, it's so great to see all of you. People that know me know that I'm a person of few words, so here's my talking points. When I heard about the award and just being mentioned in the same breath of Dr. Vander Ark was just really incredible for me. I try to keep my head down and stay focused, but when I think about Dr. Vander Ark, he's someone that has shown a bright light on the issue of health inequities and health disparities, and so I can say that that it's because of his work and his passion that it laid the foundation for Clinic Tepeyac to start 24 years ago. But not only to lay the foundation, but to allow Clinic Tepeyac, an organization like ours, to thrive in this environment, especially an environment that we're dealing with right now, a very challenging environment to work within, given the population that we're serving. And so I'm just deeply grateful to even be mentioned in the same breath. But I also want to thank my wife, Gloria. She's the year that we got married, we celebrated our anniversary yesterday. And she's been standing shoulder to shoulder with me this whole way. When we started the clinic 24 years ago, she was there right next to me. She's an accountant by trade. But more than anything, she was there when we opened and was there holding our patient's hand and offering that reassurance that this was a safe place and that Clinic Tepeyac was their home. And so it's because of Gloria and so many other people that have made Clinic Tepeyac possible that I'm here today. So just thank you for this honor.
right, so we're winding down this year's Health Talks. This is the 4th Health Talks that I've been Executive Director of Central Progress. I'd say the biggest turnout, and definitely the most beautiful crowd that I've witnessed. And you all have seen Zootopia, more of you have seen Zootopia than Bad Boys. What a great energy we have in this room. I just wanted to mention that my staff sort of duped me into wearing this tie today. This is my 4th December Health Progress Luncheon, but my first time wearing a tie. Anyways, this has been a great I want to thank DeRay Mckesson again for being here, and also the audience, again, thank you for coming. Especially I want to call out the legislators who are in the crowd. If you all could stand up and just be recognized for your public service, thank you. I know we had about 10 folks here earlier, we were going to mention them. So thank you again. I want to also thank the board members who are here, board of directors members. We have quite a few in the room who are new to this organization and sort of bringing new life and new energy into our work. You can see sort of the shift that we've made over the last couple of years to really focus in and lean into the difficult conversations around race and equity. A lot of our new board members have been the emphasis behind some of that shift. So I want to have every board member please stand up as well and be recognized for your service. Last but not least, I want to ask the staff to please stand up or raise your hand if you're already standing. Katie, that means you stand up. This is the best group of leaders and organizers and policy advocates and communication staff that we have around in the state, I would say in the region maybe. We're really driving change. It's so fun to go to the office every day and work with these folks. And in particular, today's a bit of a bittersweet day for us because it's sweet because all of us get together and we get motivated and inspired to continue our work. It's a bit bitter because Katie Vane, who's been our development manager and development coordinator for the last almost 4 years, is leaving us. She's going back to New York to pursue a new career out there. She'll be development director of a mental health clinic in upstate New York. I don't think upstate New York will know what hit them when Katie arrives. She's sort of she's orchestrated all the events and the development for our work, helped put this, the driving force behind this event specifically. So we want Katie to just come up and be recognized for her time in Central Health Progress, and we're going to miss you. Once again for helping us put this event on. If you could do your evaluations as you walk out the door, that would be great. And we'll see you next year. Thank you.